Hi, everybody. Today we are going to talk about one of the first and most important pieces of homework that you're going to have to work on as it pertains to adopting these workflows into your practice for your team. But before we get into that, I'm also going to be talking to you about different ways in which you're going to be doing that. So what I'm talking about here is filling in the assign to field within the workflow template. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. And I want to first emphasize what those ways are and why you would select one way over the other. And then we'll come back to the homework here. So the part that I'm talking about here is having you fill in the assign to fields in the workflow template. So the assign to is going to be basically you answering the question as you go through each one of these templates in your database. Again, we're in manage your account, and I'm working in the workflow templates right here. And specifically, the one that I'm going to be using here to demonstrate is the distributions from a brokerage account. So what the assign to field does is it is your role and responsibility to assign every one of these tasks in the workflow template to someone in your firm that's going to be responsible for doing this task by default. Know that you can always override who is assigned to the task once the workflow is actually attached to a contact record. This is simply the default instruction, who's going to be responsible for doing this task more times than not in your firm. Now, there's 3 different ways in which you can assign this task at the template level to someone in your firm. There's assigning it to an individual user. There's assigning it to an individual team, or excuse me, there's the user, there's the ability to assign it to a team, and then there's the ability to use roles in the CRM. I'm going to ask that you not even consider using the individual user, and I'll explain why by kind of indirectly answering that question by talking about the benefits of using either the team approach or the role approach. So if you're unfamiliar with roles, let me first demonstrate or explain to you what roles are. And to best do that, it'll pull up a sample record here, Betty Davis. You'll notice that over in the contact record, so I'm at Betty Davis's contact record. If I'm clicking on her record, what I would do is I would expand more. I would go down to permissions and roles. And now what I'm able to do is I'm able to bring up contact permissions. And this is in a siloed type approach or a siloed firm where maybe you have a couple of different advisors or you have a couple of different practices all operating within one CRM. And maybe you don't want this group of clients to be viewed by this advisor. You can segment them by contact permissions. So this allows users in the database to not see all the contacts. But what I'm talking about here is roles. And specifically, there are 3 ways in which you can add role, or that roles exist in a contact record. We have the advisor, which would typically be the lead advisor. You'd have an associate advisor, which could be sometimes called your junior advisor, or case in point, an associate advisor. And then there's the CSA, client service associate. So this would be also talking about practice manager, assistant. This would typically be your CSA is going to be your non-licensed person. Your associate and advisor are obviously going to be your licensed. The benefit in using roles is that it gives you the ability, a couple things. Number one is that this works really, really well in a large firm where the clients belong to the entirety of the firm, but there are different advisors that would serve different clients. So, for example, if I go to my entire client list, let's say that I have 2,000 clients in a firm, and there are 5 lead advisors in this big firm. If I wanted to have and use workflows, if I want to have a distribution from a brokerage account and let's say out of those 5 advisors, 3 of those advisors' names are John, Jane, and Mary. Well, if I assign the tasks that are relevant to John, and then I have to use this workflow for a client who is assigned to Mary, I defeat the purpose of having workflows, because every time that I would assign this workflow template that had John in here to one of Mary's clients, the assigned to tasks for John would automatically default on his to-do list, not on Mary's. But if I go ahead and utilize roles, and I were to assign a role, the advisor role, to all of Mary's clients and assign that to Mary, now I only have to have one workflow template. And I can use that same template across the board, regardless of who the client belongs to, who the lead advisor is for that person. And the same thing is true with his advisor associates and also with client service advisors or client service associates. So it negates the need. Now, the other workaround for that, what happened before contact roles came into play, is that let's say let's par down a little bit. Let's say that I had a big firm with 750 clients, and I had 3 advisors, John, Jane, and Mary. Well, what we would do is we would tell the firm, okay, create 3 different workflow templates and 3 different workflow templates, all of the same name, but in parentheses, maybe it would say Mary. And then Mary's workflow template, all of the tasks that were assigned to Mary would have the default user or team assigned to Mary, and vice versa for John and Jane, whoever names that I use there. But again, by utilizing roles, now I can affect and I can segment the client base and the workflows responsible for that person at the client level rather than at the workflow level. So I hope that makes sense. If you're still confused on roles or you want a little bit more clarity, Redtail does have a good a good training PDF or a good training resource. That's the word I was looking for, on their website under the help desk. So again, if you click on help and you launch the Redtail help desk, you can go ahead and access their training tutorials on roles and understanding a little bit more detail. So I mentioned roles is one way to do that. The other way to do that is to utilize teams. And if you're going to utilize teams, this is kind of the second best option. I'm a really big fan of utilizing roles. But Teams is another best option, or the second option. And the way in which and why I recommend using Teams, first of all, let me go back to where you would modify your teams. So we're going to be manage your account, and this is only available for admin level users only. So we're going to go back down into here, manage database users and teams. And what you're going to see right here, all the individual users, I'm going to click over here into Teams. What I recommend doing is if you're going to use Teams in Redtail, I 100% recommend that you create a team for each user in your database. So what that means is you'll notice that I have 4 different teams here, all of which only have 1 member. So Team Adam has the user Adam assigned to it. Team John has, well, in this case, I think I assigned Team John, right? Or Advisor John. Client Service, you'll notice, has 2 different people. And this is where utilizing, if you have multiple different client service associates. So let's say that you have one massive firm and you have 3 different practice managers or 3 different assistants that kind of whoever gets to it first can go ahead and start working on that project. Going ahead and adding people to a client service team is a way around that so that the same task shows up on 3 different people's to-do list. It just, whoever gets to that task first can go ahead and accomplish that task. But let me illustrate the importance of why I recommend using teams, even if it's at the individual level. So again, I only have one individual on a quote unquote team, as opposed to using individual users. And let's use the example of, let's say that John, who has John Advisor, let's say that John, as much as we love John being on our team, John decided to go on to bigger and better things in his mind, and he went to work for a firm across town. And in John's place, we added Mary as a team member. Okay. And so what I would do is I would create Team Mary. Now I would already have a Mary user in the database. And so what I would do is I would add remove team members. And again, let's say that I had a Mary, and let's just say that Mary, let's use one name that's already in here. Let's use Lisa as my admin. So I'm going to add Lisa as the team member I'm going to add the user Lisa, too many names going in my mind. I'm going to add user Lisa to Team Mary. Now, let me demonstrate why I did this at the level of workflows. So remember I said over here, the assigned to is the default who it's assigned to. And when you attach this workflow to a contact record, it will automatically assign the relevant tasks to the team member assigned at the template level. So let's say that if I go down here, and this was going to be assigned to Team John, right? That's who I was saying before was going to be responsible for doing these tasks. And we're going to we'll say that this is also assigned to Team John. Submit forms, we'll make that relevant to Team John as well. And this is what I'm doing right here is what you're going to have to do. This is your first big piece of homework as a firm, is to sit down, identify with the team who's responsible for doing what. Don't worry about the when and for which client. That happens once this workflow is actually attached to a contact record. Your homework is to go through, and before you start doing this, make sure you stick around to the end of this video, because I have a very important step that I want you to do before you start doing this at our template level. So stick around to the end because I have one more thing to show you. So again, let me finish this up here. I'm going to make this applicable to Team John. Okay, so you'll notice now, let me just, if you want to see whether or not the assigned to is at a team level or an individual user level, let me add this, or let me modify this to show you what it looks like. So let's say I make this as the user Adam. What you'll notice is that you'll see the first and last name. So if you're ever looking through a workflow template and you wonder, that's John, is that user John or is that team John? Users are always first and last name. Teams are going to be, and this is why I recommend naming the team just by the first name only, so that you're working at the template level, you'll know instantaneously whether this is at the team level or individual user level. Now, remember I said the scenario, John decides to go into bigger and better things, move to the firm across town, and Lisa is going to be joining the team instead. So if we go back over, I said Mary, let's keep things consistent, okay? So let's go ahead and change Team Mary to Team Lisa, okay? So Lisa's already joined the team, right? But I now have the problem of having everybody that all the tasks, all the workflow templates that had Team John are still assigned to Team John. So if you were doing it at the individual user level, if all of these were at the individual user level, what you would have to do is go into every single workflow, go into every single task and change it from user Adam to user John, or in this case, from user John to user Lisa. But here's the magic of how this works. If, on the other hand, I go into my teams, so Team John left, you can have as many Team Lisas as you want. So what I would do is if John left, I would go in, I would edit this. I would label this Lisa. I want to expand this out, right? Because I see it's Team John. I want to add and remove team members. So I'm going to add Lisa and I'm going to remove John. I'm going to update the team members. Okay, we see that's now. I'll just refresh it just to illustrate the point here. And now we see everything's John here. If I go and refresh, everything's now been changed to Team Lisa. So this is a way to have a blanket change, a blanket approach modification or blanket modification to all of the assigned to fields in your workflow templates. As you grow your team, if you lose a team member, as you add, again, it's a very, very easy way to have kind of a waterfall effect on changing users. So that's why you'll never hear me really recommend using the individual user at the workflow template level. I'm always an advocate for, at the very minimum, doing teams, but I really, really would encourage people to think about utilizing roles. So how you do that is I would go ahead and add roles. So again, and you are limited in these three options. So you don't have the ability to create new roles in Redtail, but candidly, from a practice management standpoint, I don't really know why you would need anything above and beyond this. Again, if you're a CPA and estate planning firm, a mega firm, that's a different challenge for a different call. So we're in a different video. So we're not going to get into that. But candidly, this is going to serve 98% of the firms out there. So we're going to serve, let's say I'm the lead advisor and I have advisor associate and I have CSA as Jane. Now what I would do, so this is, and one other thing that I'd like to emphasize here, if I go back to, let me make one more tab. Again, the benefits of using Chrome and doing a right-click duplicate tab. What you can do is you can do a bulk action. So if I want to show all the contact records in my database and I want to select all of them, again, in our demo database here, we have 52. I can go contact options, bulk actions, and I can go, if I can remember exactly where that is, role assignment. There it is. From here, now what I can do is I can assign, again, this is default, this would go to all of your contacts. So what you would have to do is, obviously, if you're in a multi-advisor practice where you have all clients under the one database, but multiple advisors, each serving individual clients, you would have to pull each advisor's full client roster into the advanced search, into the search fields here in Redtail, and then do a bulk assignment for each individual advisor's clients. But it's not like you'd have to go into each individual client and do it one by one. You can do it via bulk assignment. So you would go ahead and do that for every single one of these people. So I could go ahead and change it to that. I could change this to advisor associate, and then I could change CSA to admin. And if I do that, again, we'd want to make sure that if you do have anything, I'm kind of a best practice, go ahead and overwrite. I have no problem doing this. So I'm going to assign the roles. And you'll get an email confirmation when that has been completed. And so now if I go ahead and click in this contact record and I go into my permissions roles, we're going to see everything filled out. And now if I were to go into my workflows and I attach, rather than having it Team Lisa, I go in and I edit task. And this is why I'm a big advocate of roles. Go ahead and do role. And this would be CSA. And so now every time that a workflow is attached to a client record, the role of this task, because the default in the workflow template is assigned to the CSA, this task will automatically be assigned to whoever, if I can remember my tabs here, that task will automatically be assigned to whoever is attached to the CSA at that client level. So I hope that helps. Now, again, that's your homework, is to go through each individual workflow. So here I'm in the distribution from brokerage account. Go ahead and do that. But before you do that, one final step. So if I go back to our workflows, so scroll down, we're in the distribution from brokerage account. If you'll remember in an earlier video, one of the first videos, I mentioned that there is no undo button. There is no back button. There is no way to Control Z any modifications that you do to a workflow. So before you go and do what I'm doing, what I'd like you to do is do two things. Number one, I want you to clone this workflow. And all that does is create a copy of the workflow at the template level. And then what I'd like you to do is, so we go back to that clone. You'll see it down here. It'll have copy in the title. I want you to edit this, and I want you to do two things. I want you to put your firm's initials in parentheses, and then at the beginning, I'd like you to put a number. It doesn't have to necessarily be in order, though. Again, candidly, just start going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Try and keep them in alphabetical order, but that really doesn't matter. And here's why I'm recommending you do this. If I update the template, remember in the earlier video I said that Redtail, it works on an alphanumeric basis. Well, technically speaking, if we're thinking about it, it's a numeric alpha precedent. So what I mean by that is now if I hit refresh, that workflow that I just copied and modified is not only is at the top of my workflow templates, but as you start using these and you attach that, so if I want to attach that workflow to a contact record, you'll notice that it's at the very top of your list. So what it does is it forces you to just kind of work off of your workflows that you're creating. That way, if you start poking around in this workflow, if I go back to, oh, there we go. Sorry about that. If we go back to this template and I start poking around in this workflow, again, this is one that I created a copy of. Let's say I start dragging steps around, adding tasks, deleting tasks, and I make a mistake, or I realize, you know what, I've modified this one so much that it doesn't even work anymore. If you did it on our original workflow, there is no back button, there is no undo. But now all you have to do is if you get to this point and it's broken, just delete this copy, create a new copy, and you're kind of starting from scratch. So again, your homework in order, number one, create a clone and start with maybe the top 3 to 5 workflows that you're going to be working on. Create a clone of those top 3 to 5, or think about it this way. Think about the top 3 to 5 processes that you're focused on in your firm. Maybe it's this one, sending money out of an account. Maybe it's ACAT, so transfer of assets. Maybe it's setting up a new account. And maybe it's processing direct rollovers. So that's 4 processes. So go into our workflow templates, find those processes, again, whether that's client service, new accounts, clone those workflows. Again, that's your first step. Clone the workflow and rename it as I talked about above here, and then decide whether or not you're going to work on a role basis or a team basis. Again, I discourage you from thinking about it as a user basis. Roles or teams, regardless, and depending on which one you choose, go ahead and start working through those processes of defining your roles. If you're going the role route, you're first going to have to go into all your clients and make sure that you assign the correct role to the correct user for each individual contact or each individual client. And then once you have that done, go into each one of those workflows and start working through the assigned to fields, asking yourself again the question, who in our firm is going to be responsible for doing this more times than not? You will find, just from a best practice standpoint, I'm a big believer in that advisors should be involved in the business as few times as possible and only focusing on revenue producing activities. So you'll find that in a lot of our workflows, the advisor is only involved in the very beginning by default. Again, remember, this can always be overwritten and changed once it's attached to the client record. So the advisor is only in the beginning of this, and then the support staff, whether it be associate advisor and or client service associate, those are going to be the individuals involved downline. So the next video that we're going to get into is going to be once this is done, we're going to actually attach this workflow to a contact record and see how the workflows work and get a peek into the method behind our madness as to how we created these and the best practice that we'd encourage you to adopt as it pertains to just documenting what has happened as you work the workflow. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.